Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Belinda McCauley. I am the Executive Director of the Beverly Hills Bar Association, and I am so pleased to be here today to be able to introduce Penelope Codrington to you. Penny is a legal rock star, having spent more than 25 years as an attorney at law firms and in-house after graduating from Harvard College and Harvard Law School. And she's now using all of her talents at her own firm, where she provides dispute resolution, organizational development workshops, and attorney career development training. And it's that latter area that she's going to speak with us about today. Penny and I are in an online group together where she recently shared her top 5 tips for law firm attorneys seeking to foster better relationships with in-house counsel. And I read her post and immediately contacted her to say, can we do this as a CLE for the BHBA? Because it's such great content, not just for outside counsel, but also for in-house counsel to say, hey, yeah, I would like for my outside counsel to do that. That would make my life easier. But before I turn things over to Penny, a quick plug for those of you who are BHBA members, we have a brand new in-house committee. And that is limited to just attorneys who are currently in-house. It's to give you a space, both online and in person, to share best practices, counsel recommendations, other useful information. And if you're outside counsel, please join our business law section. Both are a great source of networking and programming and are active and growing. And there's no additional charge for BHBA members who are sustainers or above to join as many sections and committees as you'd like to participate in. So we'd love to see you there. And if you're a BHBA member, well, you're here today, so you'll get credit for today's CLE. But starting next month, all of our great CLE content is going to be available on demand for participatory credit. BHBI On Demand is launching in June. So keep an eye out for the email announcing that and more details about how to sign in. But it's great and makes compliance an absolute breeze. So with that, on to who you're really here to hear from, Penny Codrington.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for signing up to spend some time with me today. I'm really excited to speak with you. And I wanted to start off by sharing a little bit of how I came to be sitting here talking to you. So I'm a mom. I've got 3 sons, and one of them is a really, really good wrestler. And there was a wrestling event, a parents event, and I went. And I live in Washington, D.C., and you can't really lift your arms up in Washington, D.C. without touching another lawyer. So I wasn't too surprised when it turned out that 2 of the wrestling dads that I was speaking with were actually big law partners. And so I started chatting with them after a few cocktails about some of the gaps in my expectations when I became in-house counsel after leaving big law, about the services that I was receiving from firms. And I also talked to them about how it felt to go from a firm to in-house and what I thought would have been really helpful. And I was pleasantly surprised that these partners were so interested in what I had to say. And they were so interested, I thought, hey, I'd like to share this information with more people. And that's when I wrote my sort of top 5 tips for my friends in another legal group. And that's how I came, as Belinda explained, to speak with you today. So my goal today is to share a little bit about the scholarship and history about the relationship between the general counsel and the law firm partner, to talk a really small bit about why the touchy-feely aspect, the soft skills are so important, and then to delve into some tips which are not only born out of my experience, but I made sure to gather them from a lot of my friends so that I would have enough substance to give all of you all today. So now, before we actually dive into all of this interesting stuff about what we all do, I'd like to just take a couple of moments to talk about our wonderful collective community. And so I'm going to get a little zen here, but if you're in a space where you can, I'm inviting you to sort of make yourself comfortable, maybe plant your feet on the ground, take a couple of breaths. As I said, I'm on the East Coast, so it's already 3 o'clock here. I'm in my home office. I'm really hoping that my dog doesn't bark too loudly during this session. I'm imagining that some of you are at home and some of you are at your workplaces. Maybe you've just come out of a really busy meeting, you're having a quick lunch. Maybe you're about to go into a really busy meeting. But I just wanted to take a brief moment for us to consider all that we have overcome and dealt with in the past few years. I think that we don't pat ourselves on the back enough for the fact that not only have we been juggling all of the stuff for our own families, parents, children, our friends, but we have been juggling a lot for our clients, many of whom have been really sort of discombobulated with all that's been happening. And so I really don't want to sound too corny. My kids are going to say that I'm too corny, but when you step back and take a big picture look at all that attorneys have been doing, no matter where or what or how they practice, our group is the one that keeps everything rocking and rolling. You know, it's who runs the world? Lawyers. And that was a corny bit my kids told me not to say, but I think it is true. And I want us to just take a moment to think about all of the awesome things that we get done as a group. So thank you for allowing me to do that. I want us now to hop into some of the substance here. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I hope you can all see. This photo is of Professor David Wilkins, and Professor Wilkins is a professor at Harvard Law School. He is also a director at the Center on the Legal Profession there. And Professor Wilkins has done a lot of outstanding scholarship on the relationship between general counsel and law firm partners. And you can kind of get a hint of how he feels about that relationship if you look at the bottom of the slide and you see this article that I've also included in the readings, and it's called Team of Rivals Towards a New Model of the Corporate Attorney-Client Relationship. And, oh, I forgot to say, interesting fact, Professor Wilkins clerked under Justice Thurgood Marshall. I just thought that was kind of a cool fact. Anyway, in his article, one of the things that Professor Wilkins observed back in 2010 was the sort of responsibility burden of the two sets of groups. Company counsel are, I really like the way he sort of talked about all of the work the company counsel are doing. So supplying specialized legal knowledge, gathering information, interfacing with competitors, consumers, government officials, monitoring and mediating conflicts within the organization. And I would add a couple more. Compliance has really taken off as something that in a lot of places in-house counsel are responsible for. Sometimes interacting with third parties like vendors, helping oversee vendor contract management. I mean, in-house counsel, they're doing a lot. On the other hand, in law firms, oh, the pressure, right, on law firm associates. Law firms are dependent, what does he say? They dependent on their associates basically to provide the firm with the capital it needs for its survival. And so its survival is dependent upon its associates billing and working as really long hours, really hard. And at the same time, in-house, you have in-house counsel who are trying to push down the legal fees and do a lot more themselves. So how did we come to this somewhat bizarre state of affairs among colleagues? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about these two gentlemen who sort of have a really interesting role in how we got here. So the gentleman on the right is Paul Kravith of the Kravith, Swain and Moore firm. And Paul was born in 1861, and he is sort of given the credit for being the creator of the big law firm. And so what Paul did is he created this system, sort of, I think it was called the Kravith way or the Kravith strategy. And this is a system of principles that are still being used by large firms to this very day, right? And so what he did was he hired lots of librarians and built big libraries, so all of the resources would be there for the attorneys that he recruited out of law school or out of clerkships. Attorneys were supposed to be trained in the firm, and firms adopted a lockstep approach to bringing them in, and then it was up or out. And the partners of the firm were all supposed to be experts in all of the various areas that any company would need legal help in. And Professor Wilkins talks about how these firms thrived, especially from the New Deal era until like the early 70s, based on what Wilkins calls informational asymmetries. And I really like that term. And what he meant was that there weren't really any general counsel, because we have all of these new corporations coming up, and they're really sort of dependent on one firm to rule them all, basically. And so they got all their services from one firm, which also meant that it would be very difficult to get rid of the firm that was working with you, because that would be really disruptive to your business, which also meant that the big firms didn't really have to do that much selling, right? Because once you got a big client, you're sort of in like Flynn. So at the time, law was seen as sort of very distinct. I guess at the time Mr. Kravith was alive, sort of distinct from politics, distinct from morality, sets of rules that the folks in these firms were supposed to be expert on. And so, so that sort of explains their dominance. Then, much later, we have the gentleman on the left, Ben Heinemann, and he was general counsel under Jack Welch at General Electric. And Ben said, enough of this one law firm controlling everything. What I'm going to do is break that control and hire my own lawyers. And he ended up hiring about 1,000 lawyers for GE's legal department. And he has a really great book out. It's called, he is now a professor at Harvard Law School. And he has a book, it's called The In-House Counsel Revolution. So I think it's a great book. It's really long. It's about 400 pages. But what he did, he's credited as being the leader of the in-house counsel movement, which sought to break up this monopoly and have the law firms compete for the bits of work that they were going to get. And that really sort of changed the game for big law firms. They became a lot more active in trying to get business. And you'll also see that the salaries of associates kept going up and up and up and up and up. So David Wilkins noted in 2010 that a lot of big companies were going towards what he called a trend of convergence, meaning that they had adopted this new way of having multiple law firms doing lots of things, but it had started to get very unwieldy for in-house counsel to manage. And so then they did things like having preferred providers. So sort of in between, not one law firm, not a ton of law firms, but preferred providers. And it's really weird thinking about yourself as sort of a historical artifact, But I feel that way because when I started working for a big firm using the Kravith system in New York. Then I went to a regional firm, which understood very well the notion of having to compete for business. And one of the great things they did was they flew all their associates out to the Chicago office. And we had a 2-day seminar on how to build your business. And it was so successful, actually, that a couple of us ended up leaving our firms. We got, a little bit overexcited and tried to start our own firm. And then I was in-house counsel, where I was part of this whole convergence trend, because part of my responsibility was severely limiting the number of firms, reducing, I should say, the number of firms that were working with the company. So one of the things that Professor Wilkins noted was that there was a study by BTI Consulting, and they asked general counsel and law firm partners what was the most important part of the service that the GCs wanted and the law firms provided. And both groups said client focus. Great. Unfortunately, when the law firm partners talked about client focus, they meant doing the best thing for the client. When the general counsel spoke about client focus, they meant understanding the business. And so that takes us right into the soft skills part of my presentation today. So understanding the business. One of the things that you get if you ever Google building a better relationship is you'll see all of these words. And so as we're sort of building our cathedral today, shout out to Ken Follett. These are the pillars, I think, of building a good relationship, whether it's a business one or not. And I think you might ask, why do we even care? Because, we've got the work. If you're a law firm associate and you're doing the work, why do you need to do all of this extra stuff? And so my response would be, you want the client to share all of the information with you. You want to be the person that the client calls when they're upset or when they need someone to help with something. You want to have grace in the event that you make a mistake. You want the client to pay your bills without quibbling too much. And you want referrals. So having a good relationship is key. So empathy is the first pillar that we talk about. Of course, we know that empathy is the ability to sense, understand, and relate to the experiences, thoughts, and feelings of others. How do you do that in a business context? In this context, so I'm going to say that you want to understand the company. We know that's true from that survey that Professor Wilkins referenced. You want to understand what your counterpart in-house is actually doing, and you want to understand on a more personal level what that person's career aspirations are. So starting with the company, how do you do that? So easy these days. You can go straight to the website, keep reading it regularly. There's so much information there. It'll help you understand the culture of the company, what's important to the folks there, whether it's a mom and pop affair, is it a big division of an international business? Of course, basic, looking at the website. But if it's a public company, please be sure to check out the SEC filings. And side note here, if it doesn't really matter whether you are doing HR work or whether you are doing M&A, tax, or intellectual property work. It is really important that you learn how to speak the language that the business people are speaking. And I highly recommend that you take, if you were like me and avoided the financial accounting for lawyers class like the plague, then you may want to consider taking a CLE on business terms, because I think it's a must that you read the 10K, the annual report put out. There's so much information in there, and I know that because I used to be the person who was at the printer all night proofreading these things. And then, the 10Q, just to see what's going on with the company. The product or service that your company makes, try it out if possible. Learn as much as you can about it. If it's something that you can eat, taste it if you can. One silly side note, I guess, is if you are going to a meeting at the company and it's something tangible, like say a watch, something small, probably best not to flaunt your watch made by the competitor or your bag made by the competitor if it's some item like that. And I'll tell you, just because it is, it's petty, I know, but folks do take notice of those sorts of things. So just remember to leave your competitor's item in the car. Social media, key, what a gift. You don't even have to feel like you're spying on anyone. LinkedIn is there. You can check out the CEO. You can check out everyone on the legal team, see what they're about. Twitter, these days, I really, I feel for the in-house counsel who are responsible for helping monitor social media for the company. It's a lot, but so much information that you can get there by just following. Industry periodicals, really, really important on a local and a national basis. So you can always ask the client what they read. You can ask the ultimate client what you should be reading. If it's real estate, you should be reading about national real estate trends as well as local real estate trends, just so you are knowledgeable. You can join in the conversation and you can be a step ahead thinking about ways that you can help that client and help the lawyer. Understanding the company, it's also important if you can. I know it's very different now with a pandemic, but in some ways it's easier because so many things are now online, as painful as online meetings are. Industry gatherings are important. If there's an annual conference that everyone in the industry goes to, how great if your client sees you popping up there, learning all that you can learn. And I know it's hard sometimes to make the pitch to do these things to your partner, but it's worth a try. Bar organizations in the area, focus on the area that you are interested in. Wonderful bar associations like the Beverly Hills Bar Association, just checking it out and trying to meet as many people as you can there. Other lawyers, helping you understand the company and the company's business and the industry. When I first started practicing, I was told never to count on other lawyers for business, for example, or for referrals. And I find that has been completely untrue. It is important to be out there, of course, at all of these organizations, but it's also important to network with other lawyers who can be very helpful when you are trying to understand what's happening in an industry, and also just for general networking. So those people that you work with in one company or in the firm, make sure to stay in touch with them. The people that you went to law school with, go to those law school reunions, put yourself out there to meet other attorneys. So then when we're talking about understanding in-house counsel's role, just because an in-house counsel has one title in one company doesn't mean that they're doing the same thing in another company. Their name doesn't really mean anything. So you really have to ask to find out. And the things that you want to know are, of course, who are their clients internally? Who are they supporting? You might have just been assigned on a real estate deal, but this attorney may be handling a whole bunch of different issues along with different sorts of real estate issues, and you want to know about them because you want to be able to insert yourself and be helpful. What is the scope of in-house counsel's responsibility? What sorts of things are they responsible for doing? You want to also figure out where they are located, where the clients are located, because there may be, if they have national responsibilities, there may be the ability for you to bring in someone else from your firm to handle the matter in Hawaii or the matter in Indiana. You want to know sort of what's the 360 environment for the person you're working with, meaning who do they report to? Are they reporting directly to the CEO? Are they part of the C-suite? How, or the person that they report to, what is that person responsible for? Who are the other attorneys that they're really partnering with a lot in the company? And are they a managing attorney? Do they manage people? Is there an opportunity for you to come in and maybe do some training for the people that they manage? So finding out what their world looks like. Then this is one of the things that is, it was one of the things that I spoke about to the gentleman that I talked to you about before. And it was that no one had ever actually asked me how I was evaluated. So very different, right, if you're in-house. So in many places, in-house counsel receive bonuses based on whether or not they meet or exceed certain goal expectations. And often the in-house counsel are tasked with coming up with goals that will help push the needle forward. And in the past, I don't know, decade or so, it's been really important for business people and lawyers alike to have goals that demonstrate that they're moving the business forward. So for example, reducing the amount of litigation by 10% with maybe a stretch goal of 20% or something like that. And so how helpful would it have been for me, or I know it would have been super helpful when I was in-house, if someone had just called and said, hey, Penny, what's your goal setting looking like this year? And maybe I wouldn't have been able to divulge everything, but I would have really appreciated and maybe thought about whether I could brainstorm with that outside counsel about some goal that I needed to reach and how their firm could help me reach that goal. And if the goal is to reduce the amount of legal fees or lawyers, how helpful that you're right in there, making sure you get a say so you can quickly sort of discuss your new flat fee rate or whatever. Tasks, touched on this a little bit before, but is your counsel responsible for doing training? Is there an opportunity for you to help with even more generalized training about maybe ethics or tech? I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then finally, you want to know what are the pain points for in-house counsel? What are the things that are really worrying this person with sort of more of a big picture perspective? What are they thinking about long-term? How can you sort of help them develop a plan that will address future issues? Because it's very helpful if you can be proactive and maybe not reactive all of the time as far as waiting for some sort of issue to pop up. If you can help them understand that you can help with a potential problem that may crop up in the future. So this one I threw in, understand in-house counsel's career aspirations, because of a wonderful interview that I heard with Wangji Walcott, who is the general counsel of Discover. And so she's in an interview and she was talking about how when she was a second year lawyer, fresh out of law school, she was having one of these performance reviews with her boss. And she had done very well. And the boss said, hey, I wanted to let you know that I think you can be general counsel one day. And she said, what? Do you mean I could have your job? And he said, no, not my job. I mean, general counsel of the entire company. And she said she kept that seed. And I think, how great that she had such a wonderful mentor. And she ran with it, right? And now she's general counsel of Discover. So just imagine if you had been outside counsel working with her, you might have been thinking, hey, I'll hitch my wagon to that store. But sometimes, obviously that's an extreme example, but it is very helpful to understand how it is your in-house counsel sees the future and how you can be helpful. Intentional listening, just including this as part of empathy. Asking, I think as lawyers, sometimes we really, really want to be helpful. And so we want to jump in there with solutions, maybe sometimes before the client has had a chance to completely articulate what the issue is. And so I think intentional listening is actually a skill, and it takes a while to develop it. One technique that I found to be very helpful is called looping. And it's a way of showing that you're being a supportive listener. And so the client is saying, for example, oh, I'm so worried about the warehouse in Warehouse City. And looping is when you sort of show that you're listening. And when there's a pause, you can say, wow, the warehouse in Warehouse City, it sounds like a real problem. So, sort of reiterating what they've said, and then following that up, if necessary, with a open-ended question. I just want to say that this, the environment in in-house counsel firms, in companies, it is a fact that there are a lot more women working in companies, and than there are working in law firms. And I don't know if this is a gender thing. I'm not a DEI expert, but I can say that in my experience and the experience of a lot of women I know, being talked over is a real challenge sometimes. And I think it's important for all of us to just really think about the fact that we are in a service relationship, especially, law firm associates with in-house counsel, and to really remember to pull back and listen with intention, because at the end of all that listening, you're going to jump in with, do you think this is a good solution? Would you like to work together on this? Would you like if I did X, Y, and Z? But after you've had a chance to listen and think about what's being said. Okay. Moving on to respect. And so by respect, I really sort of mean watch out for, think about. And this slide always makes me laugh because I want to start singing. Also, I'm studying Portuguese and I can't do the R's. So I am, anytime I see a word beginning with an R, I'm a little bit like, whoa. So anyway, reading the room, respecting counsel's time, and protecting our wonderful collegiality. So reading the room, folks, as you all know, it's 2022. Diversity matters. People who look like me are, 2% now of, Black women attorneys. And it's really, I think you all have so much power to maybe change that dynamic a little bit. If you look at company websites, many company websites, post George Floyd, people are really interested in diversity. So I think that's something to think about when you go to a meeting, when you think about how and who is going to work on various matters. Just, and to think about what your law firm looks like and how you can help drive home the message that for many companies, diversity matters. It's just, this is a thing now, and you are trying to sell your services. So what can you do? And it's for you to reflect on to make sure that you attract more clients by being the people who show up at the meeting with a more diverse team, or whether it's on Zoom or in person. Visit your client and visit Counsel. There is so much that you can learn by requesting a tour, maybe, of the manufacturing facility. If you're a lawyer, you're walking through, you notice OSHA issues, you might notice, you can ask about permitting issues. So much opportunity to find a way that you can be helpful if you actually come out of your office and go to the client's facilities, especially if they're retail or manufacturing. They have warehouses that I just mentioned. It's also important to try to schedule some non-billable opportunity to meet with the counsel if they have time, maybe a lunch, maybe a coffee or something. People like the attention. They like feeling as though the person that they are, they've advocated for to come on board and to be compensated by their company really does have interest in getting to know them. Support staff etiquette. I just threw that in there just because support staff are really, really important in-house and often have a lot of input. And so I think it's important to be mindful not to treat support staff as your own staff. And one of my friends made this point that is something that it sounds like something that wouldn't happen a lot, but it actually happens a lot. And I think it's something to watch out for. Note on emails. When I first started working, someone told me, if you have a choice between being a little bit late and getting rid of some typos, be a little bit late. So the way your document looks, the way your email looks, the tone of your email is really important, because you best believe if there's something off, it's going to get forwarded around, and you don't want that to happen. So take the extra time to be sure that if you're being paid to provide an email, that you provide one that looks good. The presentation is important. Moving on to the time issue. So interestingly enough, this was one where there was a lot of input from in-house counsel. And I'm sure that for law firm associates too, everyone's desperate for more time and to save time. I think the concern is whose burden is it to take care of the little things? So starting off with introductions. A very wise person volunteered that it would be so helpful if outside counsel sent fee cards at the beginning of a matter with the names and contact information, of course, of all of the people who would be working on the matter. Because sometimes emails start coming in and you're like, okay, who is this? You don't know if it's the paralegal, you don't know if it's the, some other partner. It's helpful at the beginning. And I'm sure it's helpful the other way as well. Emails, the labeling of emails is key. Sometimes in-house counsel are working on hundreds of matters. And so it is so helpful to have something in the email at the top, either in the ray line or the top, really being specific about what client it is about and what the email is about, just so the person can eyeball that quickly. Discussing labeling and filing conventions with the in-house counsel before you start working on a matter is very helpful, so that that in-house counsel can take it and put it into the company's filing system and doesn't have to spend a lot of time relabeling information that you're sending. And how great if there's a number associated with that client in-house, so that the client can quickly recognize where it goes, and not your number from the law firm, because that's sort of irrelevant for your client. Email attachments, a little thing, but controversial. Folks were talking about how the attachments often, for example, if you're forwarding something that's been sent from opposing counsel, and you're saying, okay, here's the emails that were sent. It's really time consuming for in-house counsel to have to click and open each of the attachments to figure out what's going on. Because the attachments that you've sent have the printer's label on the bottom or just odd numbers, so you don't know what's happening. So please take the time, if you can, to label the attachments and in your email to provide a little summary, not only with what's in the document, what the name of the document is. I have attached the blah, 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 but what you're going to do. If you've read it, brief summary, and then plan is, let's have a conversation about it, or I plan to do blah, blah, blah. And if you haven't had time to read it, it's perfectly acceptable to say, I haven't looked at these, just wanted to get them to you quickly, but I will get back to you on such and such date. Review process. So some companies have really complicated signing authority protocols. And so it's important to know at the beginning of a matter, how long, what's the estimated time for something to be signed off on? Because it's incredibly frustrating to get a document with the admonition that, this has to be signed by this evening or by tomorrow. And that you have to get it, you have your sign off sheet with like 5 business people's names on it who have to eyeball it and sign off on it. And if it's something that the board of directors has to look at, well, you're in serious danger of not making that deadline. So it's really something that in-house counsel should make clear, but it's always good to ask, how long do you think this sort of document will take to get signed, and build in your delivery of the document within that time period. Commitments, of course, as you all know, and I'm sure you do, keeping commitments, promises to get things done by a certain time, returning calls. And then I think the final thing that I know in-house counsel are concerned about sometimes is there's a lot of time spent on these wonderful newsletters that law firms send out on maybe a monthly basis. And a lot of times they're not read. So it's very helpful if you are going to send out a newsletter to your client to maybe point out something. Hey, Gina, take a look at this section 2 of the newsletter. I really think this could be helpful to you. Let's discuss. And it's a wonderful way to sort of leverage the hard work done by the summer associate who's put together that newsletter. And you're showing the client how it pertains to them and how maybe there's something that you guys could work on together. Business opportunity. Protect collegiality. So I kind of like this slide. Because this stock lady from the photograph looks like someone I know. But by this, inclusion, responsiveness, billing literacy, I threw those all in this category because I think it is so important to remember that we are all colleagues and ultimately we have the same client, even though our relationships are a little skewed by, well, the history that we talked about earlier. So I think the inclusion part of it, I'm just talking about, don't discount, and I think this is actually a sentence that someone shared with me, don't discount me because I'm not the general counsel. So there is sometimes a feeling that the folks in the law firm want to talk to the senior most person that they can, when actually the person who is actually doing the work and who will be advocating for your firm is much lower in the chain. So I think that's important to realize sometimes. Sharing the agenda. I think this is an interesting one because, of course, in-house counsel want law firm associates to really take charge on some matters and come back with, this is what we need to do and this is what needs to happen. But there should always be an opportunity for in-house counsel to say, well, I'd also like to talk about this, that, or the other. And just that conversation to say, hey, do you think we should do this, that, or whatever, just including counsel on some of these, especially if the client is going to be sitting in the meeting. Giving credit as part of inclusion. I think this is important on both sides to always sort of mention, especially if there's a really junior person on the team too, just saying, thank you so much to so-and-so who did whatever small thing they did. It can go a long way to making people feel like part of the team and that we're all in this together. So the responsiveness, I was thinking about sometimes the challenges that I faced coming from a firm and going in-house with answering the client's question. Because in the law firm, I was used to doing a lot of research and getting all the case law and putting that together in a nice memo. So different in-house. We want the answer to the question. We want it a succinct answer. So if, I totally understand that you need the backup by, with case law, but the top of your memo, if the client asks for your advice on something, should really give the advice. I think it's fine to do this. I don't think it's fine to do this, that kind of stuff right at the top. We don't want to have to dig through the case law to figure it out. The other thing that I think is something that law firm associates should really think about is understanding how to give a risk assessment, because so many times a client is going to say, well, how risky is this? So, and the in-house counsel is going to ask you, how risky do you think this is? And so you've got to have some sort of scale in your head, figuring out how you are going to determine how to answer that question when you're asked, and don't kick it back. Well, you're the person who's there, so you should, that's not helpful. Billing literacy is something I think that's key. I don't know, when I was in a law firm, I never actually looked at an engagement letter. I've drafted a lot, or signed off on a lot, I should say, and there's a lot of work that goes into an engagement letter from the in-house side. There's, stuff in there about what we'll pay for or won't be paid for. And you can learn a lot by just looking at the engagement letter. So that can help also as you're being proactive and thinking about other ways you can help the client. If you can ever get a glance at that engagement letter, it can show a lot of information. And billing literacy, I mean, sometimes when there's a problem with the bill and you're asking your counterpart at the law firm, the bill says this, they will say, or they may say, well, I'm not the one who handles bills. So-and-so handles bills. Well, you could speak to so-and-so. Well, that's kind of hard because in-house counsel doesn't want to have to chase after someone at the firm to talk to them about the bill. So to the extent that you're able to say, I'll get back to you on that, I'll talk to so-and-so and I'll talk to you about it, it just makes life so much easier for that in-house counsel. Next thing that we want to talk about is soccer team, mutual success. All right, so career development issues. I think we can look at this two ways. The two little phrases I like: lifting as we climb, and we all rise together, depending on the power dynamics. Just reflecting on the fact that we're all colleagues and we should all be trying to ensure our success and, of course, the client's a good result for the client. Something that I would have loved to have done would have been to co-author something with an article with one of the brilliant lawyers that I had the pleasure of working with. And I think that's a great way for people to both add something substantive to their resumes, and by partnering this way with the operational person who's out there in the front lines a lot, and the person who is doing a lot of the research and the theoretical underpinnings of the work that it's been done at the company. I mentioned briefly ethics and tech before, because most of the attorneys at the company are really focused on getting the job done. I think that having an outside counsel willing to come in and maybe a couple of times a year give talks on ethics, various ethical issues that come up, can be very, very helpful, and I'm sure is a selling point that a general counsel would be very happy about. Tech. So many ways these days to improve the profession by using tech, so many different apps and things. And if there is someone at your firm who is fluent in all of these new technologies and new ways to do research, and how cool if you would offer that to company counsel. I think feedback is another way of sort of assuring mutual success. Some firms I know send out surveys maybe annually to general counsel, just asking for feedback. Sometimes they trickle down on a scale of 1 to 5. How would you view this attorney's work? It's such a formal mechanism and not everyone does it. I think that it might be helpful for you to just ask at the end of a matter, hey, Sally, is there anything I could have done better? Could I have been more helpful in some other way? And just get the feedback yourself. And hopefully in-house counsel will ask you for feedback too. Training, harking back to Paul Kravith and his, getting a lot of training done for associates at the firm. Sometimes in-house counsel are so busy, they don't have a chance to do training. So maybe consider whether or not you can ask if you can invite an in-house counsel to attend some of the training, training about specific aspects of the law that they may be interested in. Oops, sorry, I forgot that slide. Appreciation. Everyone wants to feel appreciated. This slide is so nice and happy. So how do we do this? Recognition. An appreciative note goes a long way, both sides. An appreciative note from a partner at a law firm to the GC about how wonderful one of the attorneys was. Oh, great. Making introductions sometimes. If you have an in-house counsel who is working on antitrust matters and you have someone at your firm that's this amazing antitrust person, how cool to facilitate introductions for that person, especially if, having read the room and done some work on your counsel, you know that this person may have some sort of really busy evening and may not be able to go to a lot of events, may not have the opportunity to meet a lot of key people in the field. And that sort of pops into events. As a single mom when I was working both at firms and in-house, it was such a bummer for me that so many of the events were at night. There were these dinners and bar-related things that I didn't get to go to because I had responsibilities at home. So to the extent that all of us can be more mindful about people's personal lives, I guess, and whether or not it is a struggle for them to attend various events. It might be easier sometimes to schedule breakfast or lunch meetings sometimes. Thinking about opportunities where you can sort of help showcase the people that you work with, I think is always important, always appreciated. I think sharing is caring. Again, my kids would be rolling their eyes, but it really makes people feel so much better to feel this way, and taking the time to recognize someone is always valued. And so trust was the last one of the pillars. So competence, of course you're going to trust a lawyer who gets it done. That's key, right? You have to get it done, get the job done. Candor, something that counsel want a lot. They want you to speak the truth and be brave, even if it means going against what you know the in-house counsel wants to hear. Speak up, be brave. Ultimately, someone who just parrots exactly what they think the attorney wants to hear, it doesn't always go over well. So be careful about being candid and brave enough to say what you really think. Clarity, we talked about answering questions succinctly. Creativity is one I think people don't think about a lot, but the part of the reason why law firm associates are so valued is they get to see a lot of different scenarios. And a lot of times in-house counsel are looking for something new and interesting. They're looking for some thoughts that are a bit outside the box. So don't be afraid to be creative in your responses and to throw more stuff out there for your client to think about, because then you're giving that lawyer so much more to go back with to the client. And finally, accountability. If you don't know, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. I will get back to you. Fake it till you make it doesn't really work. Admit mistakes and ask for forgiveness. So I wanted to end. I see that we've reached the end of our time together, just by telling you about a survey I just saw, so that I'm looking at it, from the Clio Legal Trend Report. You know, Clio, they manage law firms, software, and stuff like that. And they said, after doing this whole survey of tons of firms and companies, businesses that are best at delivering on consumers' expectations are the ones that will secure more clients. So I really hope that something, even if just one thing that I've shared with you today, will help you secure more clients and will add to your success. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm always happy to talk to folks. I think my email is at the bottom of this slide. And yeah, so thank you very much. Appreciate it.